Hello and welcome to Outspoken by Femme Health, the podcast where we celebrate women's wellness, empowerment and the trailblazers reshaping the future of health. I'm Stef, one of the founders, and I'm incredibly excited to introduce a very special guest today, someone who has dedicated her career to supporting individuals and couples throughout one of the most personal and emotional journeys, fertility. Tracey Sainsbury is a highly experienced fertility counsellor who has worked with leading clinics and now provides independent counselling for more people at all stages of their fertility journey. Her work is rooted in compassion, understanding, and the belief that there's no right or wrong path, only what feels right for each individual. Beyond her professional expertise, Tracey's own experience with infertility, adoption and fostering has deeply shaped her perspective. She has volunteered for over 20 years with Fertility Network UK and is also an author. She's passionate about self-care, trauma and the emotional complexities surrounding fertility decisions. Today we're going to dive into all things fertility, from the emotional impact to coping strategies and the importance of mental well-being. So Tracey, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to see you, Steph.
No problem. I always love writing like a welcome, and I just think everyone needs to hear like a summary of yourself once in a while and just see, what amazing things that we all do, and you for definitely. And we have been trying to get you on this podcast for a while now, so I am so glad that you're here.
Thanks so much for having me.
No problem. Okay, so shall we just kick it off with your background in fertility counselling and what inspired your journey into this field?
As you've mentioned, I'm a mum through adoption, and I'd worked as a nanny. So when I worked as a nanny when I was 17, 18, 19, I used to work with lots of mums who'd had new babies who then struggled with secondary fertility. So I'd gone off and found all the fertility information for my employers around. There used to be a fertility charity called Issue. And when quite a few years later, we had our own fertility journey, joined the charity. Internet was still in its infancy then. It was a dial-up connection. You may not even remember that far back.
I do.
But I wanted information. I think when there's something going on in your life, I think women become like sponges. We want to become more of an expert than any doctor we're going to meet. So as our fertility journey progressed, volunteered with a charity and used to run the South London support group for Issue, and was a member of another fertility club called Child. And after we adopted, two things happened. One, I'd got no experience of loss, so I did my counsellor training to help me be a better mum. I thought if I could listen better, I did listening skills and then bereavement counselling, and then went on to do my counselling training, and then also got offered a job. Issue and Child, the two fertility charities, merged to form what was then called Fertility Network UK, and I worked with them for the first 8-9 years, setting up their online communities, managing the online communities, hosting a lot of the groups, working with volunteers, working with all of the clinics in London and the South East. So lots of experience was gained at that point.
Mm-hmm. It's really powerful, and I hear it so often being in this space and developing femme, and is women that have made a career through their own personal experience. A lot of the brands that we stock here at Femme, like My Over, and We Overcame, they all developed the formulas and the supplements and the community and the education around their own personal fertility journey, and you hear it more and more.
It's really interesting because what your counselling training teaches you is nothing about anything anyone else, because we all have our own journey. So again, with fertility coaches, fertility experts, fertility professionals, where there's a gadget, a technique, an app, a product, their awareness of not what's missing has got something to market, which is blooming fabulous. It does annoy me when professionals or friends, family members say, I know exactly how you feel, because
Yeah.
none of us have a clue as to how it is in our body. So just a reminder that counselling isn't anything to fertility counselling isn't anything about the journey that a counsellor's been through. I didn't become a fertility counsellor till years later on. I was a counsellor working in mental health for a long time first, and then when my husband got made redundant, there was a job opening in a fertility clinic, so I was able to combine the two passions. But it is that when you're training to be a counsellor, you then need 2 years post-qualifying experience before you do your fertility counselling training, so your own stuff is far enough away, because it can be triggering. If I'd been closer to my fertility journey, I wouldn't be able to do the work that I do.
And you can separate the
Yeah.
two. Did that take some time, or did that come naturally
As I said, I'd been a counsellor for a long old time before.
before?
I was working with a fertility charity and a counsellor in primary care and mental health before I became a fertility counsellor.
Okay. And just going back to what you said there about the listening skills, I actually personally would love to do that, because I think in this modern day is
Yeah.
that we're probably just taking in more visual things, with social media and TV, Netflix, we're absolutely bombarded with visual things. And I often sometimes forget to listen. It really is about being present in the moment. And I imagine, well, I don't need to imagine, because I have seen a counsellor before for other things in my life, is that just that hour on one-to-one time with no distractions can be so profound and powerful. Then ever chatting with a friend, your phone goes off, your daughter wants you. There's so many interactions in life in this day and age, isn't there?
There certainly is, and often we don't give enough time or space to hear ourselves, never mind anybody else.
Exactly. I just wanted to move on quickly to the emotional toll of infertility and navigating loss. Now, that's a big, powerful sentence that I've said there, and it's not something that we can cover. We could do a whole season on that and what that can look like. And like you say, it's individual for everybody. And I think in terms of loss, there's all different when it comes to fertility. It's the loss of what could have been. We can dissect that into a million different ways. So I just wanted to just touch on the grief of an unsuccessful treatment and the loss of a hoped for future, and how in your profession you tackle the anger that comes with that, because there's often many emotions.
Yeah.
You have this theory in your head in your 20s what life's going to look like. I'm going to get married, I'm going to have children by 30, and you've got these big plans, and then all of a sudden you're facing treatment, and you're unsure, and the unknown, and everything that you said may not happen, and you can experience a lot of emotions. How what's your advice for tackling that?
Embrace it. When we look at grief, we acknowledge a grief cycle. With fertility losses, whether it's a loss of life as you thought it would be, you go in for a fertility check and have a disappointing result. You're not pregnant, you've been trying, you've had an unsuccessful treatment cycle, or pregnancy loss. If you try and paper over it, it's going to break. Whereas if we give, again, it's about time and space to listen, not just to how you're thinking, but how you're feeling. Trauma memories are held in our body. So I see anger, it's a completely appropriate emotion. It's as valid as everything else, and it's like a big ball of energy. But we're told as kids you shouldn't be angry, so we tend to internalise it, or when we're very little we might act out and be told off for it. But if it settles here, it can promote anxiety, or it can settle anxiety in your chest, or settle backs of your arms, tops of your shoulders, up into your neck. It can make you want to grind your teeth. And it's so helpful, because in primal times that anger energy would put you into fight, flight or freeze. Now, often what women are really good at is beating ourselves up because we think we should make a decision and move on. But with fertility, when we're in that frozen state, we're rebuilding robustness and resilience. We're working out which way we're going. Are we going to try again? Are we changing direction? Nurturing capacity is a capacity. What are we going to do with it? And if it feels too difficult, too complicated, too overwhelming, we pause and we physically can't move. But when we're ready, we make a decision as to what to do. But we can't fast track that, which is why I always say to clients, don't come up with too fixed a plan. When you're processing grief, you're on a beach. You're not on a cliff edge, you're not going to fall off, you're on a beach. And on the horizon are lots of different nurturing options. And you've looked this way to plan for a pregnancy and treatment hasn't worked, or it hasn't worked this month if you were trying naturally. And you might go again that direction, or you might shift and look a different way. But if you've got fixed in your mind, we're going to do this once and then move on to something else, or stop trying, or whatever, and you change your mind, we beat ourselves up for not sticking to a plan.
Yeah.
Whereas if the plan is give time and space to see how you feel, then you know when you're ready.
Yeah. Well, if we just move on slightly to invisible, I've heard this quite often being in the space, is that infertility can feel like an invisible loss. So, you know, if you lose somebody, you know, passes away of natural causes, you know, the elderly, obviously you're still dealing with grief, but it's almost grief that everybody understands. My nan's just died, my dog's just died, and instantly whoever you are speaking to, they get it.
Yeah.
When we talk about loss, like an invisible loss, I do think it is a great way to describe it, because nobody can see it. It's your personal loss, and it's the loss of something that's not happened. Have you heard that terminology before?
Professionally, research, academic level, it's called disenfranchised grief.
Okay.
And I call it flow, for fantasy loss ownership.
Okay.
So when we look at invisible losses that others don't get or can't see, when you start planning for a pregnancy, we tend to put life on hold. I won't drink, I'll eat better, I'll take this supplement, I'll do this, that, or the other. And we experience the loss of life how it was before we started trying. And then we might be working and we might be offered a promotion and we might say, I'm not going to go for it because I might be pregnant, or if we go for fertility treatment, I might be in treatment and it'll be too complicated. You might want to change job and stay in that job because you want maternity leave and you're assuming you're going to be pregnant, so you're putting up with more than you should. I won't make this plan because of that. Money is huge. Our unconscious shouts, you can't put a price on a baby, but the money's important. So there are all these things that society says you should be grateful, you're ready to have a baby, you should be hopeful and optimistic, and instead you can feel devastated because life hasn't panned out as your hopes, dreams and fantasies. But those hopes, dreams and fantasies often weren't just adult and recent. The 4-year-old you can be mushed, the 8-year-old you confused, and the teenage you pissed off, angry and upset that adult life is so unfair. So when we're looking at loss and invisible losses, the need to self-nurture and respond with compassion isn't just to the grown-up outer adult you, but every age you've lived through inside as well.
Yeah. No, it's a really powerful way. I love flow. I've never heard that terminology before. Also, when we go back to society, is this expectation and pressure to just keep trying. I've physically been in rooms where I have heard women opening up about their fertility journey and women saying, just keep trying, just stay hopeful, just keep trying. Where does that end? How do you process, I can't anymore, I know my fertility journey's over, but everyone's telling me to keep trying? How do you then, because then you sort of feel like you need to give people an explanation. So how would you tackle that?
I think you need to give them an explanation when you're not ready to stop but feel you should.
Mm-hmm.
If you're ready to change direction, there's a primal drive and desire to reproduce. If you conceive accidentally or you're not proactively trying, you're not aware of what a pronatal society we live in, where women especially value others by whether or not they have a child.
Yes.
And childless women are punished in the workplace especially. It's always women without children who pick up the slack for everybody with a child. They never ask a man. It's kind of sad, but how life is. So there can be 40% of people going through IVF have suicidal thoughts, 80 to 90% anxiety and depression, because it is so hellish. It feels like you're failing as a woman by not delivering the baby when you're proactively trying.
Yeah.
But if in your body you know you're done, you know you've tried enough, it's almost like a switch is flicked to a different direction. We're going to look in a different way. If we're pausing, it's really powerful to say we're taking a break. We're just taking some time. Anyone who loves you and cares for you can be saying, keep going, try. They wouldn't say that if they didn't think you'd make a lovely mum.
Yeah.
So we welcome their compliments and say, thanks for that, but I'm just taking a bit of break, a bit of time, work out what we're doing next.
Yeah.
But if you know you're ready to not carry on, your narrative changes. Oh, we really tried. Sadly, we weren't blessed in that way. If somebody says, how many children have you got? Sadly, none. We did try, but it didn't work for us. Your narrative is claimed and there's a congruency there, and people tend to shut up, but respectfully.
Yeah, it's really powerful how your language in those two scenarios, if somebody was saying that to me, it stops any interpretation. It's really closed off. You couldn't then say, oh, just keep trying. So it's really around the language around it. Because I know many women, and close family members of mine as well, that they've actually stayed away from social settings and celebrations going on at the time because they just didn't want to be asked anymore. So it's really powerful, and I would definitely, outside of this podcast, like to do some work with you for our community on the language and the communication when it comes to, and it normally is from such a place of love from your close-knit friends and family.
People don't like sitting with helplessness.
Yeah.
So if anyone loves you and you're struggling, they're going to say, come on, don't worry, I've got a good feeling about this. Let's hold on to hope. You can want to gag them. You know it's said with love, but it can drive you a bit nuts. So again, that acknowledge the sentiment. Sometimes we need a robust shield of resilience to swap back other people's stuff so we can keep the energy in rather than waste it batting it away.
Exactly. And just going back to what you mentioned earlier about childless women picking up the slack, and I often do see this even with flexible working hours, working from home. Oh, you haven't got children, so you don't need that. And hearing that when you've been on a fertility journey, that maybe everybody doesn't know, it can be. So I think there's also work still to be done within the workplace when it comes to language, and how we tackle things, because we never know what somebody's going through. Okay, so you've come to terms with the fact that you may not have a child, or your treatment's ending. When we look at redefining a meaningful life without children, when you've been so focused for such a long time on the hope that you're going into a new chapter of your life, and that being one with a child, how do you tackle feeling like you found purpose and identifying really the woman you were before? Because you had purpose then, you got up every day, had a life to live. But I know that can it can get lost, in a fertility journey. How do you rebuild from that?
We're blessed now to have the internet. At times it feels punishing, just thinking of social media, but there are some fabulous communities and resources and quite inspirational people out there who have spoken up. Now, years and years ago, and it's still there used to be an organisation called More to Life for people who were involuntarily childless, And way before I became a counsellor, so more than half my lifetime ago, we went and did some research to find out what fertility clinics could give to patients having treatment who had finished their treatment journey with the clinic. And we spoke to people who'd had children through fertility treatment and what they needed, if they were needed to get back in touch with the clinic, what support, what information for parenting after an infertility journey, for secondary fertility. Did a little leaflet, little resource pack. For people who were embracing donor conception, we did the same. And for people who were involuntarily childless, I went with a researcher from the Centre for Family Research at the University of Cambridge to a More to Life weekend. I'll be completely honest, we'd not long adopted and we were struggling. It was shit. It sounds harsh, but I'll be honest, it's just easier. So I pulled up at this big farm in Kent and we saw two big marquees in the grounds. And we figured, and this is me being sexist, judgmental, pre-counsellor days, I'll be completely honest, we figured there were two marquees there, one for for women to cry in and the other for men to get drunk in, is what I thought. That's what I was expecting. I thought the men would be drinking and the women would be crying and chatting, was what I was expecting. Very naive, because we walked in and there were probably 60, 70, 80 people there for the weekend. One tent was for sleeping in, one was for party, and it was like a mini festival for people who had a really difficult time but wanted to connect with others in a safe space. Nobody asked the dumb questions. Nobody said, how many children have you got?
Yeah.
Everybody said, how are you doing? Tell me about you.
Yeah.
And it was mind-blowing because having recently adopted and been thrown into school settings, I'd lost my identity. I'd become somebody's mother. And my God, I was a bit grief-stricken then. I was delighted to be a mum, but it was a huge period of adjustment. And if you have a big group of people in their 30s, 40s plus that wasn't in that safe setting, because it makes you watch.
Yeah.
Everybody says, oh, how many kids have you got? And then whips out a picture of theirs.
Yeah.
So it is, I want you to know that if life isn't kind or fair, if you're hoping for a baby, life doesn't end if you embrace donor conception. There's the Donor Conception Network. If you look at adoption, there's Adoption UK. If you look at fostering, there's the Fostering Network. If you embrace being involuntarily childless, More to Life is still there. They're amazing. But there is also the most amazing woman I've been blessed to work with her quite a few times, called Jessica Hepburn, who her fertility journey sent her on a mission. She did go a bit mad. She swam the Channel. She's climbed Everest. She's organised Fertility Fest that I was proud to be on the steering committee for. But there's Jessica Hepburn, who's definitely worth dipping into if you are looking at resources around possibly not even plan B or C, it might be D or E. But also there's an organisation called Gateway Women that was set up by another fabulous woman called Jodie Day. And there's a fabulous chap called Robin Hadley, just to make sure that you know I'm just not women focused. I've got a book here called I Always Wanted to Be a Dad, Men Without Children, because there are so many men's fertility groups and support resources now, and anybody can get in touch and ask for anything after this. It is, don't lose yourself in the internet. Go for the resources that feel a bit like a comfort blanket organisation. Shove them in the cupboard and pull them out when you need them.
And connecting in person, I bet, is really powerful as well, because you know sometimes, like you say, you go down a rabbit hole on social media and you can read things like, oh, me too,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
sitting in the space. So this sort of mini festival, do these things still happen, or?
There are lots of get-togethers, there are weekends away, there are retreats, there are all kinds of things. And it wasn't a festival, it was just lovely couple who'd planned to have paddocks with ponies for their kids.
Wow.
And sadly hadn't been blessed, you know. And many people, often the really naff comment is, well, you can always adopt. Well, actually, adoption's complicated and isn't for everybody.
Exactly, yeah. And just going back to what you said then about, you know, people asking how many children do you have? And they say it so open and so publicly. And you also, I always find this, that when you go to like networking events or you have to stand up and they'll say, you know, tell us a little bit about what you do and, you know, how many children you've got and things like that. And you have to stand up like it's some,
Badge of
you know,
honour.
yeah, badge of honor, you know,
Yeah,
and women particularly, you know, in the last, I would say 5 years, you know, how far are you, you know, in your career? What do
yeah,
you do? And it's like, so we, you know, we're meant to mother and look after the home, and then also have this incredible name tag on a career as well, and it can just feel like too much.
yeah,
It can.
yeah, yeah.
It can. Listen, Tracey, I know that you are on our panel of experts for femme health. We've worked with you for over 2 years. I've heard you speak multiple times. Every time I speak to you, I could keep going. My fiance loves it when I'm meeting with you, and because he knows that I'm going to be like, I've spoke to Tracey about a healthy sex life. It's always really open conversations, and I could do a whole season of podcasts with you. But I just want to thank you so much for your time today. And if you've got any final thoughts and words of encouragement for the listeners, I mean, my takeaway really from doing this session with you is the language piece. I've never thought of the language piece when you are on a fertility journey and you don't want opinions.
For women, as 4-year-olds, we're told be a good girl and good things happen. As 8-year-olds, you're told work hard, put the effort in and reap the rewards. And as teenagers, never have sex or you'll get pregnant. So I think the most important thing to remember is all of those ages with hopes, dreams and fantasies are still inside. So if you're trying to be a grown-up and be sensible, come on, pull yourself together, get a grip, we can cope with this, you're often being way too hard on you. The 4-year-old you can be mushed, the 8-year-old you confused, and the teenager you're a bit peed off. So nurture the inner little you, be a bit retro. What helped you to feel safe at the age that you're feeling now? Because it's rarely grown up, it's often triggered something much deeper.
Thank you, Tracey. And where can our listeners find you? I know you're an author, so tell us a little bit about where you are most active. Is it on Instagram?
Got a copy of my book, Making a Baby. My website is fertilitycounselling.co.uk, so people can gladly get in touch via the website. I'm IVF counsellor on Instagram, but more importantly, if you've got a question or a message, Tracey.Sainsbury at fertilitycounselling.co.uk. Get in touch, ask anything, anytime, everyone's welcome. Femme are such a beautiful brand of women who feel passionate about women. It's like girl power in action. It's fab.
It really is. And it's always a pleasure to speak with you. So thank you so much for your time. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Take care.